Ethics Unpacked with Professor Gonsalves. I have created these short videos as a learning aid for my students. It's meant to supplement our in-class content, and I hope you find it useful. If you're not one of my students, that's okay too. I hope you enjoy the series, and I hope you find the information useful and informative. Maybe it'll inspire you to read a little bit more about ethics. So ethics is derived from the Greek word meaning ethos. Ethos refers to custom or character. So ethics is primarily focused and concerned with that which is right, and it's trying to distinguish right and wrong. Ethics provides a set of standards for behavior that helps us decide how we ought to act in a range of situations. The field of ethics involves developing, defending, and recommending concepts of right and wrong behavior. Ethics is seemingly a simple subject. Decide between right and wrong and act in accordance with that decision. The only problem is we don't always agree. So we ask ourselves, who gets to decide what is right and what is wrong? And are things that are right always right in every circumstance? And if they're right, are they also fair? And if they're fair, are they fair to everyone? But most importantly, can we agree on the answers to these questions? Well, the world we live in is a complex one, and the answers are rarely binary. So we have to investigate further and develop a tool for unpacking these complicated situations. If you were on a deserted island all by yourself, your ethics, your morals, your values, none of these things would have any consequence. You could be neither ethical nor unethical because there would be no impact on any decision or course of action you chose, save for maybe the environment and your ability to sustain yourself, right? But add one person to our hypothetical deserted island, and all of a sudden the whole situation changes. See, every one of us has our own frames of reference. We view the world in different ways, and we judge right and wrong differently. Ethics, at the end of the day, is a transactional relationship. And by definition, a relationship involves other people. A course on ethics does not just prescribe a set of rules and regulations, something that you have to follow every day. If it did, it would suggest that all rules can answer all questions, and that's not reality. So ethics gives you a way of understanding problems and issues. It gives you a way of deciding which variables impact that situation and who it affects. Ethics is all about unpacking complexity and figuring out a way to arrive at the best decision. And probably the best place to start is understanding the terms that we use when we talk about ethics. When we talk about ethics, we usually talk about it from one of three perspectives. Right? And I call this the ABCs of ethics. So either we're talking about the actor, the person that's doing the thing in question, or the behavior, the thing that is being done, or the consequence, the outcome of that behavior. Depending on which lens you're looking through, you will evaluate and judge the conditions differently. That is the ABCs of ethics, and that is a good starting point and a good tool to use to keep in mind what we're talking about. Socrates is the person we consider to be the father of modern day philosophy. And Socrates is probably a good place to start any course, right? So Socrates lived in 479. He lived from 479 to 399 BC, before the Common Era. And everything we know about Socrates, we know from the writing of his students, because he actually didn't write anything. He was the old school philosopher that pondered the meaning of life and tried to figure out how to be better. But the most important point for our purposes that we'll take away now is one of his famous lines. One of his most famous lines was, "The unexamined life is not worth living." What he meant by that is to not investigate our thoughts, to not explore why we believe what we do, leaves us short. See, Socrates believed that knowledge was the greatest good and ignorance the greatest evil. And so he developed a method that we now call the Socratic method. It's a dialectic system where he had conversations with people, and he would try and challenge their assumptions, and he'd try to get to the truth. That's relevant to us because when we are trying to evaluate the right course of action, it is really important that we strip away the assumptions. We're open to alternative perspectives, and we're willing to pursue the truth unrelentlessly. How we decide what is right and wrong, what the truth is, that has a lot to do with what we consider to be morally correct. So morals have a lot to do with a judgment on right and wrong, right? And usually that is determined by social consensus, meaning it is the reflection of what society values as right and wrong. We get our morals from family and early socialization. That's where we learn the basic conventions of society. That's how society functions. Morals are the guiding principles, if you will, that allows a society to function. Morals are not generally codified or enforced, right? But there is social pressure to conform to the standards that everyone considers to be acceptable. So think, for example, about, some simple ones. We think it's wrong to kill. That might be a moral. But we might also think it is wrong to let somebody else kill us. And so defending ourselves and hurting somebody in the process of doing so might be morally acceptable. That's where dilemmas come in, when you have to choose between a path that has no clear answer. Our values, on the other hand, are our personal prioritization of social morals. So we all have different things that we assign different weights to. That essentially is the best way to think about values. What do we give higher priority to? What do we assign a higher value to? So for some of us, that might be family. For some of us, that might be work or the acquisition of success. Right? Whatever your values are, I'm trying not to put a judgment and sort of outline what a value should be. What it is at the end of the day is your prioritization of moral values, of moral principles. And then you act in accordance with that. Now, like morals, your values can also be both static and dynamic. Some values might be never changing, right? Perhaps you're a person that thinks throughout your life course, family is the most important thing. And it's how you organize your life. So you might prioritize work below family. You might prioritize friends below family. You might actually prioritize everything because in your mind, your highest value is being right and doing right by your family. On the other hand, some of your values might be dynamic. You might believe that you always wish to be fair to everybody in every circumstance. But as you go through life, you might realize that's not always possible, right? There are competing interests, and that might require you to make a different decision. So values basically come down to your assignment of priority and the value you place on actions in society. So how do we know what to prioritize? There are many different ways to think about human behavior. Psychological theories offers us one lens through which we do that. Abraham Maslow, a famous psychologist, came up with his hierarchy of needs. And he did it to explain human motivation, right? He said needs were much like instincts. It follows a linear path. We must take care of our basic needs first before we can worry about anything else. So for Maslow, your capacity to be your best version of yourself, which he called self-actualization, or your capacity to reason morally and judiciously, are all second to you meeting your basic needs first. So food, shelter, clothing, those physiological needs. What he was getting at, and the reason we bring up Maslow at this point, is I'm trying to introduce you to the idea that we'll be using various theories from various disciplines. All of the ologies, if you will, the study of, that's what ology means, right? So we'll talk about biology, and we'll talk about psychology, and we'll talk about sociological theories, sociology, the study of society, and we'll talk about criminology, because we want to be able to use a we want to use every tool at our disposal to understand the multiple variables in any given situation. There will be more, I'll have more to say about Maslow later on in the course. But at this point, understand that there are theories that explain and give us insight into people's motivation. People's motivation influences their values because that's how they prioritize. Their values inform their behavior. Their behavior ultimately influences their frames of reference. And those frames of reference help them understand concepts of right and wrong behavior, good and bad action, and other such concepts. So what does any of this have to do with law enforcement? Well, I'm teaching in a justice program, and all my students have aspirations to be law enforcement officers. And if you're wondering at this point, why are you learning all about ethics when perhaps we should be learning about how to make an arrest? Well, the truth is, ethics forms the foundation of good law enforcement work. Because good law enforcement work is all about people and all about making decisions that impact real lives and real people. They're not hypotheticals. Your decisions have an influence on the lived experience of other human beings. So it's important that you have a toolkit that allows you to make the best decisions. The trust that the public places in law enforcement that allows them to function in the first place is a concept we call public trust. It is the responsibility that all public servants have to act fairly, to follow the law, to treat people in a manner that is, fitting. We do hold law enforcement people to a higher standard than the people that, they're policing, because they have two elements that the broader society doesn't in almost every circumstance. And those two things are power and authority. Power and authority have tremendous consequence, right? And we, in the enforcement of the law, there is a tremendous amount of discretion that must be used. If the public doesn't trust law enforcement loses legitimacy. And if you lose legitimacy, it is very hard to do this job. So in a human-related job, how do we make the best decisions? Well, we get informed. And when we are informed, we're able to see all of the things that influence a given situation and then act in a manner that is ethical. That's what this course is all about. And that's what we're here to do.